Greetings, everyone. I'm Sister Michelle, as you know. And this month of March, uh, this this month of March, we are working on psychosocial development. Sisters have asked for this because our individual development has everything to do with how we relate to each other and how we get along together. And we need to know about our own personal growth as well as recognize the growth in others. So this month we have excellent speakers talking about psychosocial development. So today the topic is psychosocial development, establishing healthy boundaries. Boundaries are really important. They give us frameworks. And so our guest speaker for today is Dr. Mary Worden. And we know Mary from previous sessions that she has shared with us, but her doctorate is in psychology, and she has a PsyD, a doctorate in psychology. And so she's going to share with us some of her expertise on how boundaries help us shape our lives. So at this point, Mary, Dr. Mary Worden, we welcome you here today. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Let me go ahead and shift this.
And you're going to share your screen. Okay. And I usually let you know when it says everyone sees your screen.
Okay. And then we're going to go
and fit to your screen to see the original, click original size. So then in presentation mode.
I thought it was here. No, there we go.
No, because there we go. There we go. All right, you're good.
Very good. So it's nice to be back with everyone. I wish I could actually be interacting with you, but at least like to present some ideas on this topic, establishing and really maintaining healthy boundaries. So I had said in the description that good fences make good neighbors. That's a quote from a poem by American poet Robert Frost. And it's the idea of we may get along better if we know what some of the limits are, right? And so what I'll be talking about today is what boundaries are, how do they operate, where do they come from, and then how do we actually make it happen? How do we do better at those things if we're struggling with that a bit? And then I want to take a little bit of time talking about the way different cultures might look at boundaries, because I think there are some significant differences there.
Great.
So we'll start then with this. I just did this, right? So this is kind of the overview, all right? And then, so what are boundaries? So we could think about boundaries as limits, some kind of limit, right? They keep the good in and the bad out. They define what's me or not me, and they help us protect our treasures, which might be our feelings, our self-esteem. It might be our information that we have, but things that are important to us. And so it's anything that differentiates you from someone else. So there's an expression, that's getting under my skin. She's getting under my skin, right? And that's kind of a way of saying somebody's kind of invaded my boundary a little bit. So boundaries can be physical, but they can also be very much more sort of theoretical, abstract, that kind of thing. So we can see them sometimes we just feel them, right? But there are types of boundaries. Functional boundaries are what we might encounter in ministry or in work settings, in a broader community, where there's tasks, there's projects that have to get done. We work together with other people, but they're not necessarily the closest people in our lives, right? There's relational boundaries where this is our inner circle. So this might be the people that we live with, or the people, our families that we grew up with, the people that are our closest folks. And then there are internal boundaries. So the boundaries I set on myself for where I give my attention. How much food do I eat? Where do I spend my time? How much technology? How much do I speak and how much do I not speak? So internal boundaries are really important as well. So this first bit of information I'm presenting is from the work of Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. They wrote this nice little book on boundaries, and it's been on they're psychologists. It's been on the New York Times bestseller list for a long time, and they've got a whole series about boundaries in different situations, but this is sort of the master one. And I think it has some useful things. It also kind of comes from a little bit more of a spiritual perspective. So he's got some Bible framework kind of things in there, and I think it's helpful. So these are kind of different levels of boundaries, but how do we know that there might be an issue with boundaries? So what are some of the fruits of maybe less than healthy boundaries, right? The impact of boundary issues. First one is probably resentment, right? The feeling of resentment. And so we could say a boundary issue might be somebody asked me to do something, I don't want to do it, but I say yes anyway. Okay, so this is a typical thing. There's a book called Don't Say Yes When You Mean No. That's one. There are a million boundary books out there. So what happens is resentment or anger. Okay, there can be guilt. Oh, please, I need this, right? I trying to please people, right? Other kind of bad fruits, misunderstanding, being judgmental. There can be disconnection, lack of cohesiveness. There's really uncomfortable inner states, right? There's fear, like fear of being rejected, fear of being alienated, fear of somebody getting mad at us, right? Anxiety, low self-esteem, helplessness, blaming yourself, and isolation and passivity. So some people adapt to boundary problems by I'm just staying away. Okay. And so Cloud and Townsend have a really nice way of explaining this. Okay. And so I have this little graphic here. Can't say yes, or can't say or can't hear. So the typical person, we might say the compliant person, they can't say no, right? They feel guilty. They feel controlled by other people. They feel like they can't set boundaries, right? But the other person, the controller, can't hear no. So they aggressively or manipulatively, I need this done, right? I need this done by the end of the day. I don't care that you had to leave. I don't care that this and this and this and this. It has to be done, right? Or you're not, whatever. So that might be a work situation, right? Okay, so that's about can't say or can't hear no. But what about yes? Some people can't say yes. So somebody brings an issue to them. I'm really upset. We need better. This is a client of mine. To her husband, we need better communication. I feel like I'm doing all the work here. The spouse doesn't respond, right? And so there's this real bad disconnect there because the client then doesn't know what does this mean, right? And then here's another one that I think is common that we don't necessarily think about as a boundary issue, but I think is really important, is the idea of setting boundaries against receiving care from other people, right? So I don't want to bother people with my problems, right? I'm not doing very well, but I don't want to bother anybody. She's got so much on her plate, right? These people, they don't have time for me, which is more like, it can be, I'm just uncomfortable sharing how I feel about this. I'm uncomfortable letting people know that. And so I keep it inside. So that's kind of, can't hear that other people are wanting to be more engaged with them, right? So there's 4 different kinds of ways that we might have boundary problems, all right? Where does it come from, though? That's the question, right? And you had a previous presentation on Erickson's stages of psychosocial development. And I think those are relevant here. There's another theory called object relations theory that these authors talk about, and I think it can fit nicely. So I'm just going to say a little bit about that. It's Mahler and a number of other people that developed attachment theories, they talk about the earliest stages of development being so critical. So they say there's two basic ones: bonding, which is birth to 5 months, and then what they call separation and individuation, which is where you sort of, bonding is mother and I or caregiver and I are one. And then there's sort of the beginning of there's me and not me. And that's the first experience of a boundary, because as a child is developing, they have to come to that awareness, right? And so they call the first stage of hatching, 5 to 10 months. And that's where the child begins to be just noticing that there's this world out there. So they start to be curious about things and explore things with their senses. And then they really get into it into the practicing stage, which is 10 to 18 months. And they're fearless. They're like, they try things that might be dangerous. They have no concept of it. They're just excited to be walking and talking and yelling and just experience the word, practicing. And then they understand that, you know what, I can't do it all. And so this rapprochement means kind of coming back to the caregiver. So this is a time of kind of like becoming a little bit more anxious, or like, you know, I think I need my mom, right? And so then they don't come back as they were when they're 5 months. They've had these experiences. And so life after that is kind of this continually sort of developing these boundaries, being able to separate, develop the ability to take risks and confidence, and then kind of coming back when maybe you get your fingers burnt or something like that, right? And they say this happens again in adolescence in a different way, and in young adulthood. So that's object relation. So that's I think a helpful way to think about this. And of course, this is normal development. Trauma, experiences of trauma throughout childhood or different times in life also definitely affect how boundaries are created and established and changed. We're not going to get into a lot of that, but I just want to acknowledge that. Okay. So how does it work? These authors, Cloud and Townsend, they talk about laws, different kind of laws of boundaries. And I picked out what I felt were a few of the more relevant ones. This is it: bonding first, then boundaries, right? So to try to set boundaries with someone that you have not a connection or trust with, it's pretty hard, right? Second one is, we talk about, I don't want to push this because I don't want to hurt their feelings. Hurting feelings is not the same thing as harming people, however. And so that is, we don't think about that, people, by me setting a boundary, right? Let's say Michelle asked me to do this presentation. I wasn't sure I had time. I said, let me think about it for a few days. That's one of the tricks I'll talk about in a minute. And I didn't want to hurt feelings, but it wouldn't have hurt Michelle if I said no, right? So she would have found somebody else, right? And so I can't make a decision on, I don't want to hurt their feelings. I need to really pay more attention to what's going on in me and what's the realistic situation that we're dealing with here, okay? We have a responsibility to make boundaries visible and not keep them secret, right? Someone who's uncomfortable, let's say being hugged, right? We might know that, or they might just, never say it, right? But perhaps that's a person that's been through some really, really difficult times, right? I'm not saying people need to expose their deepest traumas when they don't feel safe to do that, but I had a client who kept wanting to switch her appointment to Friday, and if I couldn't meet with her on Monday, well, surely I can meet with her on Friday. And I finally said, I don't see clients on Friday. And then it was like, oh, okay. And it was, I kept trying to kind of dance around it. I didn't want to set it up. I keep Fridays for my administrative time. I'm thinking, I don't want to explain all this, and we don't need to over explain. But we don't, it's not good to keep them secret. Okay. Mm-hmm. Boundaries, they talk about you reap what you sow. So, violations of boundaries have consequences. And when we take the consequences away from somebody by trying to help them out, they don't learn what they need to learn about boundaries. So sometimes by taking somebody off the hook, right? Well, I'll just, that person got busy. We want to be helpful. Like, this is a really tricky thing because we are, I was a sister for many years. I'm still in the helping profession. I would say I'm a compassionate person. You're oriented toward helping people, right? And so I might say, oh, it doesn't matter that this person is an hour late for the appointment that we had. Well, no, it does matter, right?
Yeah.
And so if you don't call somebody to accountability, then they're not going to really learn that that's a problem. Okay. And here's another one I thought was really good to really understand, I guess with a sense of compassion, that people are going through a process. So if this leads to people having a different view and different way that they want to operate their boundaries, understand that it's going to come out extra strong maybe at first because people are new at it, and maybe they've been angry for a long time and there's some energy behind it, right? And so to give people the grace to move through that stage of being reactive and practicing to become proactive, right? Because that's more where we want to get to. All right. And so then how do we really do this? All right. That's the question.
Yeah.
Brene Brown is an amazing author. If you haven't come across her, she's got some great books. And she also has a little article on Oprah.com. So that's where this came from. This, I think, says it so much better than 1,000 books. This first one, make a mantra or a motto. Hers is choose discomfort over resentment. And as I'm going to say it again, choose discomfort over resentment. And I've thrown this out to a few people that I know, friends and also clients over the last week, and they all went, just like what Michelle said. Oh,
yeah.
oh. So it's not, if I'm going to have some kind of unpleasant inner state, let me just be uncomfortable and do this thing. Because if I don't, I'm going to be mad and resentful later on. So I don't get off scot-free if I don't hold a boundary. Okay. She also suggests keeping a resentment journal. So to help yourself get some insight into the situations and your typical kinds of reactions to people, and rehearse, practice. Now, Michelle, I'm going to tell a story about you because we lived together many years ago. And you had your first principal job in East St. Louis, and you said somebody gave you coaching about how people were going to ask you to do many, many things because of your position now. I don't know if you remember this.
No.
And they said, so we're going to practice. The phone's going to go ring, ring, ring. You walk across. No, 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 no. Hello, no.
Hello, will you do this for me? No.
No. So practicing is important, right? And especially if these are things we're not so comfortable doing. There are, as I said, there's lots of books and articles out there about how to establish boundaries, how to say no. One that I found that I liked was from Elizabeth Andrews. It's actually self-published. It's 50 ways to say no, but I'll give you 12, okay?
Oh, 50 ways. Okay.
But on LinkedIn, there's one that says 100 ways to say no. So, it's out there. So she didn't divide it this way, but I did. So definitively, you can say things like, not this time. I wish I were able to. Unfortunately not. I need to say no. No thanks, but it sounds great. Now, what's nice about that is you are connecting with them, like empathically, at an emotional level. It sounds great, right? I can't do it, right? Opening up about your own inner self, saying no is really hard for me. I'm feeling uncomfortable. That's a riskier thing to do, but it's also a way to say no, right? And this last one is the employee trusts the boss. It's going to take a minute to explain. I'm the employee. I'm also the boss, right? So I've decided you know, it's going to help me if I get up and do, let's say, some stretching exercises 3 mornings a week, right? And so that's what the boss wants. Now the employee wakes up and says, oh, I really want to sleep a little longer, you know, or let me just check my email, or any of the million things we do instead of the things that we say we want to do, right? So I'm going to trust the boss. The boss says yoga or stretching or, you know, running, whatever it is, I'm going to trust the boss, right? And so that's a way you sort of self-talk yourself into keeping those boundaries you want for yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've said this, I promised this to myself, I'm going to keep with, keep
That's
doing
right.
it. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay. And then you can be negotiable. Maybe it is no, but maybe it's just like maybe another time. Like, I like this idea, I just can't do it now. I can't, maybe someone else can help. Please ask me next time, right? I've said that to people. Don't give up on me. Please ask me, I just can't do it this time, right? Would this work instead? Or in order to do that, I'll have to do this. I'll have to not get this project done until later if you want me to do this now, right? And so those are the ways that are kind of negotiable, all right? Back to Brene Brown, because we talk about this idea of compassion. We feel guilty, right? And I took a slide out here because I was trying to make it shorter, and that was on guilt. So I'm just kind of like backing up here a little bit. If we want to practice compassion, we have to start by setting boundaries and holding people accountable, right? And we might say we feel guilty if we do that. But what happens is if we just set a boundary and don't hold people accountable, they don't learn what they need to do. And then we're kind of at risk of sort of letting those boundaries weaken a little bit, right? And so the way that we can be authentically compassionate to people is if we're not holding on to resentment, right? If I'm resentful, it's going to be really hard to be compassionate to someone, okay? So we're not in a situation of just operating out of guilt, which is a lot of times what happens. You know, if I say no, I feel guilty, or, you know, this person needs this really bad, whatever it is, you know, if we feel like guilt is playing out there, you know, we want to pay attention to that. So I want to go into a lot of just some quick ways of maintaining boundaries, right? Just taking yourself out of the situation. I need a minute, right? I need to step away. Take some time off from the person or the project. Connect with a support group, with other people that are also working on keeping their boundaries, right? Doing your inner work. So that might be a spiritual companion, prayer, reading, podcasts, therapy, journaling, art, workbooks, workshops, whatever, because, you know, it's challenging. And it's sometimes it's those inner boundaries that are getting to us as much as the external boundaries, right? And so you can discern if somebody's been responsive in respecting your boundaries, and you can be open to changing, right? And so boundaries serve people, people don't serve boundaries, right? And so you may open up to somebody as they've shown themselves to be trustworthy. You may open up with them and trust them more, or you may be able to make a bigger ask, kind of thing. Okay. So I want to move from this into the idea of culture, because different cultures have different boundaries, and there have been work done. Cluckhorn and Strobeck did some work as sociologists, anthropologists, on values that are different in different cultures. You know, what's the nature of the person? You know, how are we to relate with nature? Are we more individual or more group oriented, right? Are we about doing or being or becoming, right? These are different kinds of things. And And the one I want to focus on is more the individual approach versus the what's called the collectivist approach. Okay, and this is Hofstede, and that's cultural dimensions, right? And I'm doing this because the Poor Handmaids are a worldwide group, right? And initiated in Germany, spread throughout the world. But a lot of these things that I'm saying about boundaries are especially, I'm going to say, may make more sense or may fit more into sort of a Western worldview. But Poor Handmaids are in Latin America, Africa, India, many different places that do not necessarily have an individualistic worldview. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just going to kind of put this out here. Collectivistic cultures. This is Nickerson summarized some of these things. I have references at the end for your use. So among collectivist culture, the use of the word I is avoided. Individualistic, I is encouraged. Now we tell people use I statements to talk about how you feel, what you want, right? Okay. The interdependent self and the independent self, right? High introversion within the self, high extroversion. Collective culture showing sadness is encouraged and happiness is discouraged. On the alternative, showing happiness is encouraged and sadness discouraged, and more among individualistic, right? Collectivistic culture, avoid conflict, value harmony. Okay, individualistic culture, arguments are okay to clarify your intentions, to make clear what you want to make clear. And I think this is kind of an area where this may be playing out a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Collectivistic cultures, dependence on others is typical. It's more the norm, and having a self-supporting or being self-sufficient is much more valued in an individualistic culture. Conformity with the in-group versus non-conformity, individuation. And in collectivistic culture, there's a limited number of in-groups. So family or very, small group, maybe around people that you live near, right? Whereas in individualistic culture, we're parts of many groups based on shared interests. And the more that cultures become progress economically, the more the individualistic, those kind of tendencies or those dynamics become more apparent, right? And of course, I'm speaking in very general terms, right? There are always exceptions, and there are cultures within cultures. But I kind of want to bring this out because I think people are going to be discussing this, within your groups, within your different countries. And so I think it'd be useful to have that as part of the framework. So to sum up, right? Boundaries protect us and others. Bonding or trust comes first. Unpleasant interstates are cues that boundaries aren't healthy.
Mm-hmm.
There are lots of ways to say no. Give others grace as they practice new skills. And give yourself space. Seek support, do your inner work, and be willing to adapt. And consider the impact of culture. So I have a couple of questions here. And these are the two. What did I learn about boundaries in my family or in school while I was growing up? And how has that worked for me? And then secondly is, what is one thing I can do differently to establish boundaries with someone else and to respect when someone sets a boundary with me? So here we are. I will stop sharing.
Thank you. I learned all kinds of things today. Oh my heavens. And really good things, especially about the cultural differences. For the first thing I learned about boundaries, but the cultural differences and boundaries just really does make a difference. And so that really helps me because we are actually with the sisters who are coming to study for their master's degree in the States.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be working and living interculturally. And so it's not, it's moving, we're moving away as a congregation from the concept of internationality because
Mm-hmm.
that took a while. And now we're really saying, no, what we want to do is to do things interculturally. And so, so it should be, it's perfect. It's perfect for us in many, many ways. And some sisters simply in their own culture have um, they feel like they always have to say yes,
Correct.
and helping them free up to say all those different ways you suggested of saying no.
Mm-hmm.
This is really a great idea. I'd love to help, but I can't this time. Um, or here's what I'm going to suggest. Why don't you ask this sister or ask this person
Mm-hmm.
to make that presentation or whatever? So, because otherwise you end up with resentment and anger, and you kind of say, that sister seems to be angry all the time. Well, what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
so thank you so much.
You're
That has
welcome.
really helped us. And next week, by the way, for everyone, the presentation is by Justine Johnson, and it's all about accountability. So we're going to hear another side of the boundary piece and the accountability side. And a lot of times our sisters bend over backwards to be accountable, but there are some good things to learn relative to accountability in relationship to boundaries. So we'll look forward to hearing that. Thank you, Mary.
You're
Thank you for
welcome.
sharing with us, sharing your expertise with us. We're
Mm-hmm.
so glad that we can call on you and and help us to grow in our own sense of understanding boundaries. Thank you so much.
My
And
pleasure.
that ends our presentation for today.